Tales of Herding Gods Episode 45. The Dowist sect will also seize the opportunity to rebel. In that case, their rebellion will be justified. Instead, it will put the Empire on the defensive. So, please invite the Imperial preceptor. Everyone was slightly taken aback, not understanding his meaning. The young ancestor smiled and said, "The Dowist sect is full of stubborn minds. They only recognize rigid principles. If you want to cheat, you can't deceive them. Since that's the case, let's do it for real." Imperial preceptor, it's been a long time since you've lectured at our Imperial College, hasn't it? You few, go back. Invite the Imperial preceptor to come and teach the scholars of the Imperial College. Those disciples of the Imperial preceptor bowed in acknowledgement. They left the hall one after another, boarded the vessel and departed. The Grand Libationer said thoughtfully, "Great Libationer, you mean to have the Imperial preceptor come and teach sword techniques and divine arts, and then have the disciples of our Imperial College defeat the Dowist scion of the Dowist sect?" The young ancestor nodded with a smile. The Grand Libationer held up 3 fingers. 3 days. There are only 3 days. Old Master, can the Imperial preceptor produce a god of war in 3 days? A genius like the Dowist scion of the Dowist sect? Do you believe it? The young ancestor smiled. "I believe. Great Libationer, you shouldn't underestimate the Imperial preceptor's abilities. He is, after all, the #1 person beneath the gods. His skills are beyond your imagination." He arrived before the gate of the Imperial College Hall, looking at the mountain gate below. He sneered inwardly. "This brat doesn't get up early for nothing. I thought he wouldn't be able to resist competing with the Dowist scion here. I didn't expect him to be so composed. It's just as well. This time, we'll also invite Imperial preceptor young Donghua. It's to his advantage." Haha, the ancestor is being both open and subtle, looking out for the young cult master, Chinmu. Everything was arranged properly. At the Imperial preceptor's residence, Imperial preceptor Yankin heard the plans from these few disciples. Slightly taken aback, he asked, "The Great Libationer is asking me to give a lecture. What is that old fox up to now? He accepted you as scholars of the Imperial College just to answer a general question. Does it really require me to go personally?" A disciple said, "The Great Libationer means that the Dowist sect only recognizes rigid principles. If they knew we were the Master's disciples, they would surely not acknowledge it and seize the chance to rebel." The Imperial preceptor smiled. "The Dowist sect is indeed stubborn. I met the Dowist master in my early years. He indeed has this foul temper, only recognizing rigid principles. Fine, I'll make a trip." He summoned the little poison king, Fuyu Wanking. The Imperial preceptor had him use his hands to make the wound look bloody, then added some powder to give the wound a slightly foul smell. Finally, he sprinkled some spices to cover the foul smell. The Imperial preceptor thought for a moment, and ordered someone to bring rouge powder, applying a sickly reddish color to both his cheeks. After doing all this, Imperial preceptor Yankong smiled and said, "Now I can deceive the eyes of the rebels across the country, right?" Fuyu Wanking smiled and said, "You mean there are rebels in the Imperial College? Then it would be best for the Imperial preceptor to bring some experts. That way, it will look like you lack confidence. The Imperial College is so large, of course there will be a few rebels hiding within. However, this is the capital city. Who would dare to kill me here? As for the Imperial College, there are more experts there than in the Imperial Palace. There's no need to bring more experts. You, come with me, lest the Empress Dowager takes advantage of the situation and breaks in to kill you." Fuyu breathed a sigh of relief. His original intention was to hope that Imperial preceptor Yankong would take him along, lest the Empress Dowager take the opportunity to kill him. Suddenly, the bell of the Imperial College rang out, echoing throughout the mountain. This was the bell to summon the Imperial College scholars to assemble. Upon hearing the bell, they had to gather in front of the Imperial College Hall. After a moment, the area in front of the Imperial College Hall was already a sea of people, whether they were princes, dukes, and nobles, or commoner scholars. All were gathered here. The young ancestor smiled. "Everyone has arrived. Imperial preceptor, please begin." Imperial preceptor Yankong walked to the front of the steps, scanned the crowd and said, "At the Great Libationer's sincere request, today I will open a lecture on the sword. I will only speak for 2 days. Nothing else will be discussed." The Grand Libationer muttered softly. Isn't it 3 days? The young ancestor glanced at him. The Dowist sect is only blocking the gates of our Imperial College for 3 days. Half a day has already passed. If the Imperial preceptor lectures for 3 days, it will be too late. Imperial preceptor Yan Kong leisurely walked down from the steps. What is the sword? Has it been defined? I, for one, do not believe so. Some say the sword has thousands of moves. Others say the sword only has 14 moves. Absurd. He walked down, making the many scholars below feel a sudden invisible pressure. If the sword is fixed, then it is no longer the Tao. The great Tao is boundless. How can it only have 14 moves? Basic sword forms. He descended step by step. The pressure grew stronger and stronger, but his voice remained calm and even. Suddenly, his voice seemed like sharp swords, piercing everyone's eardrums. Why can't the sword be sound? Why can't the sword be light? Why can't it be color? Why can't it be vital key? Why can't it be a single glance? His gaze swept across the faces of the many scholars below. Countless scholars couldn't help but draw their swords, blocking in front of them, yet they blocked nothing. They couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Imperial preceptor Yan Kong smiled. So it seems. Does the sword still only have 14 moves? Cold sweat broke out on Chinmu's forehead. Only now did he realize how formidable Imperial preceptor Yang Kong was. No wonder he is the #1 person beneath the gods. Therefore, on the foundation of the 14 basic sword techniques, the Imperial preceptor continued, I have developed a few more moves. These 2 days, I will teach you these few most basic sword techniques. I will not teach any other sword techniques. But before that, I want you to forget the form of the sword. The sword can be light, it can be sound, color, a single glance. So the sword does not need a fixed form. It can be long or short, it can be hard or soft, it can attack from any angle. If you can forget the form of the sword, then you can learn my sword techniques. My first sword technique. He flicked his fingertip. Instantly, countless fine strands of vital ki, like sword light, surged out, forming a sword beam that thrust forward. This is a move from the Great Six Harmonies sword technique. It looks like a thrust, but in fact, the sword beam is formed by countless strands of sword light intertwined. These sword lights are constantly flowing, constantly changing position, but they are a single entity. Imperial preceptor Yang Kong, on the steps, meticulously explained the secret to exerting force in the winding sword technique. His explanation was extremely detailed. After explaining the winding sword technique, Imperial preceptor Yang Kong said, Scholars, you may now practice at once. In front of the Imperial College Hall, the scholars began to practice clumsily, one by one, attempting to turn their vital ki into sword ki and perform the winding sword technique. Chinmu was also trying to perform the winding sword technique. However, while others' vital ki strands were as fine as hair, his vital ki strand was as thick as an arm. Using such a thick vital ki strand to perform the winding sword technique, how thick would the resulting sword beam be? Chinmu pondered. Since this isn't working, can I use the winding sword technique to break down my vital ki strand? He acted on his thought. He immediately tried using the method taught by Imperial preceptor Yang Kong to break down his own vital ki strand. In front of the Imperial College Hall, the young ancestor's gaze fell upon Chinmu. He frowned slightly. Why isn't that brat learning the sword technique? What is he doing? Fiddling with a rod over there, not far away? Shen Wanyon, seeing Chinmu's vital ki rod, smiled. Although he is very strong, his comprehension is only average, far inferior to mine. At that moment, Chinmu was suddenly overjoyed. He laughed heartily. His voice, like thunder, echoed throughout the grounds. I did it. I finally did it. The heavens have eyes. I have finally mastered the vital ki silk. In front of the Imperial College, a scholar, the secretary of the Directorate of Education, and the libationer of swords were all stunned. Their gazes turned towards the source of the laughter. Looking on, a scholar asked blankly, what did he master? The scholar next to him was also somewhat baffled. It sounded like he said vital ki silk. I might have misheard. The Grand Libationer smiled. An interesting little fellow. Vital ki silk is the foundation of all sword techniques. He hasn't even mastered vital ki silk. So how did he become a scholar of our Imperial College? Which examiner did he bribe to get in? An official of the directorate smiled. Grand Libationer, you were away from the Imperial College for some time. You don't know that brat is named Chinmu. He's an abandoned person from the Great Ruins who defeated Taoist Ling Yun. He was personally appointed by the Emperor as an Imperial College scholar, personally appointed by the Emperor, who would dare refuse him entry. Not far away, Fu Yuanqing heard this and felt a pleasant surprise. So that's my junior brother from the same sect. He looks so goofy. Master's judgment is getting a bit poor. To have found such a simpleton, he looks very easy to bully. Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong looked at Chinmu and smiled. He whispered, a bit interesting. After waiting for a while longer, Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong spoke. All right, now I will teach you the second basic sword technique, the roaming sword. The sword flies through the air without restriction. The form of the sword is also unrestricted, therefore, the sword can roam like a dragon. Why be constrained by the basic sword techniques of our predecessors? Chinmu felt invigorated. He thought to himself, I really made the right choice coming to the Imperial College. The ancestor had great foresights. At the mountain gate, Dan Yangzi looked up. He saw the layers of palaces high up on the mountain, looking very profound. And the voice of Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong from the mountain was occasionally carried by the wind in a sentence or two. When he heard it, he intuitively felt a sense of sudden enlightenment. Dowist Scion Linjuan hesitated for a moment and said, Dan Yangzi is the person lecturing on the mountain Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong. I've benefited greatly just by hearing a sentence or two from him. I was thinking. Dan Yangzi smiled. Feel free to speak your mind. Dowist Scion Linjuan gathered his courage and said, although I didn't hear all of his instructions to the scholars, his sword techniques have truly reached an incredible realm. Although the techniques passed down by the Dowist sect have a profound foundation and are all-encompassing, his insights surpass those of our Dowist sect. This disciple believes that Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong may genuinely want to promote the development of Dowist arts and divine abilities. If that's the case, why are we blocking their gate? Dan Yangzi smiled. Dowist Scion, besides listening to his words, you must also observe his actions. That is the way of the world. No one denies Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong's talent. In his early years, when he met the Taoist master, the Taoist master also saw him as a once in 500 years genius, destined to become a saint in the future. This shows how highly the Taoist master thought of him. But what if, instead of becoming a saint, he turns to evil? Dowist Scion Lin Zhuan was confused. Dan Yangzi sneered. With his power, he could absolutely promote the divine arts and Taoist techniques, but he is wildly ambitious. He wants to subjugate all the major sects, leaving no path to survival for them. That is the first point. Second, Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong actually uses the doctrines of the Heavenly Devil cult. The Heavenly Devil cult is a false path, using the name of saints to commit demonic deeds. Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong associates with the Heavenly Devil cult. He is an enemy of our righteous path. Dowist Scion Linjuan felt a chill in his heart. Good and evil cannot coexist. He sides with the demonic path. The more talented, the greater the threat. Dan Yangzi nodded and said, he established elementary schools, universities, and the Imperial College. There is merit in this, but there are also drawbacks. Since childhood, you have been taught by the Taoist master, who has guided you until now. In Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong's elementary schools, universities, and the Imperial College, can those teachers and officials of the Directorate possess the skills and insight of the Taoist master? Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong, opening elementary schools, universities, and the Imperial College seems to give many people the opportunity to cultivate and become experts, but it also cuts off the path for geniuses. This is the fundamental reason why our Taoist sect opposes him. Taoist arts and divine abilities are advanced by geniuses like Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong. Most people are mediocre throughout their lives, only knowing how to learn what's useful. They achieve nothing, not knowing how to innovate and forge ahead. Imperial Preceptor Yang Kong has severed the path of geniuses. The harm will be fetching. He promotes these elementary schools, universities, and the Imperial College. For a time, it seems everyone is an expert, all very accomplished. But everyone is also mediocre. It's like a military parade. Everyone is cast from the same mold. Who can produce a figure like the Taoist Sun? Sects have their reason for existing. If he fails to realize this, our Taoist sect will be his sworn enemy. Taoist Scion Lin Zhuan acknowledged, his fighting spirit blazing. Donghua smiled and said, "You can disdain Imperial preceptor Yang Kung, but do not disdain his Taoist arts and divine abilities, lest you narrow your own horizons." Fellow Taoist, what do you think of Donghwa's assessment? Doesn't it also make a lot of sense? So, do you support Imperial preceptor Yang Kung, or do you support Donghua? Yes, there should be a third way, waiting for Chinmu to forge it. Imperial preceptor Yang Kung's lecture this time lasted for a full 2 days, without sleep or rest. The third basic sword technique taught by Imperial preceptor Yang Kung is called drill, and it is also extremely strange. When using a single sword, the sword tip rotates rapidly, excelling at breaking through all defensive techniques like the diamond body, and when using multiple swords, it is even more terrifying. Many swords combine to form a gigantic drill sword. Technique, indestructible. In 2 days, he only taught these 3 techniques. After that, he taught no more. Instead, he allowed the Imperial College scholars to ask questions, and he would resolve their doubts. When the Q&A was over, Imperial preceptor Yang Kung stood up and said to the young ancestor with a smile, "I've left these scholars half a day to sleep, rest, and eat. I'll trouble the great libationer to handle the rest." The young ancestor smiled. "Imperial preceptor, your talent is unmatched. Did you discover any talented individuals this time?" Imperial preceptor Yang Kung nodded. "I saw only 1 or 2. The great libationer should be able to see them. By the way, are you really going to resign from your post?" The young ancestor nodded. "My time is short. There's no need to cling to power and influence any longer." Imperial preceptor Yang Kung sighed. "When have you ever coveted power and influence? If you wanted to be an official, I would even give you my position as Imperial preceptor, but you were simply unwilling. You are half a master to me. If you leave, I will be very sad. I will have one less Taoist friend." The young ancestor smiled. "All good things must come to an end. Birth is joining the banquet. Death is leaving it. It's time for us to part ways." Imperial preceptor Yang Kung looked up at the sky and murmured, "Are there really gods in the heavens? If you were to become a god in the heavens, watching over this era that you and I have created, how wonderful that would be." He shook his head, boarded the vessel, and the vessel slowly departed from the Imperial College. The cooks from the dining hall pushed carts to the front of the Imperial College hall, letting each scholar sit on the ground to eat in front of the hall. Then the young ancestor gave an order, telling the scholars to return to their residences and rest for half a day. Wake when the bell rings. Chinmu returned to his residence. He put down the sleeping little fox, then slowly began to stroll, activating the Overlord Body 3 elixir gong. His speed gradually increased, entering a state of half asleep, half awake cultivation. Chinmu's eyes were half open, half closed as he ran wildly all over the mountain. This was his unique method of cultivation. The Overlord Body 3 elixir gong is different from ordinary cultivation methods. By running quickly while practicing, the cultivation speed is faster. Moreover, his brain is in a state of rest, and the execution of punches, kicks, and techniques relies on muscle memory. Over the years in the Great Ruins, Chinmu has relied on this cultivation method to make rapid progress. Chinmu ran for 4 hours, then woke up, refreshed and full of energy. At this moment, he heard a familiar voice laugh and say, "Have you rested enough?" Chinmu quickly turned and said, "Ancestor." At this time, there was no one else on the mountain. Everyone had gone to sleep. That the young ancestor smiled. The Imperial preceptor gave his lecture. "What are your thoughts?" Chinmu praised. "The Imperial preceptor is like a celestial god, thinking what others dare not think, doing what others dare not do, truly unparalleled." The young ancestor began to walk down the mountain. He said, "The sword techniques taught by the Imperial preceptor, how have you learned them?" Chinmu said, "I dare not say I have mastered them, but I have gained some insights. I learned the sword from the village chief, and I thought I had grasped all the mysteries of swordsmanship. I didn't expect there were still things I had yet to learn." The young ancestor said, "The saying learning is endless is wrong. It should be creation is endless. If you only rely on learning, you will be learning your whole life, and never make anything your own. Creation is what is boundless." They walked to the precipice. Before the mountain gate of the Imperial College, an old and a young Taoist were still sitting there. The young ancestor said with a faint smile, "I invited the Imperial preceptor here for the purpose of having him lecture for you. He has lectured for 2 days. You have received such a great benefit. Now go down." After hearing this, Chinmu walked towards the mountain gate. At this moment, there were no Imperial College scholars in front of or behind the mountain gate. These scholars were still sleeping and resting. Only the two Dowists outside the gate remained. Not far away, there was also a strange beast guarding the mountain gate. It had a dragon's head and a killin's body, and was chained up. It was dozing off. When Dowist Scion Linjuan saw Chinmu approaching, his heart trembled slightly. He looked at his martial uncle, Donghua. Donghua lifted his eyelids and glanced at Chinmu. Go. The Imperial preceptor taught the scholars for the sake of cultivating this person. You don't need to worry about gains and losses, Linjuan acknowledged, stood up, and went to meet Chinmu. Next up is the crucial moment of Chinmu's battle against Linjuan. What will be the final outcome? Listen for the details in the next episode. For more exciting plot analysis, welcome to continue following Chinmu's Humanistic Destiny Interpretation. Tale of the Herding God. Original author, Jaiju. Don't go out after dark. Click for safety. Okay, that's all the content for this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe. After all, your support is my motivation to keep creating content. I'm Chinmu. See you in the next video.